So I'm back out here with the Yukon today, and the other day when I was putting this thing together, I noticed there was a little bit of wetness around the oil pan, which tells me that the oil pan gasket's probably leaking. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to drop that oil pan and replace that oil pan gasket. Also, while I'm at it, I'm going to address another issue with these LS series V8 engines. Now, these pickup tubes, they have an O-ring. Usually they crack, they collapse over a period of time, heat cycles, miles. So what will actually happen is it'll cause your oil pressure actually to fall off because it'll start sucking air. So while I've got this oil pan off, I'm going to go ahead and replace that O-ring just as a precaution so we don't have any problems down the road. Okay, so there's a few things we have to do here. We need to drop this cross member, take it completely out. So since this thing's all-wheel drive, and the same thing applies to four-wheel drive, you need to drop this front differential down. You don't have to take it completely out, but you got a few bolts here. You got two over here on the other side, and I think there's one up here on the other right side. And what you need to do is support this with a jack. Take those bolts out. You're going to lower it down to hold it up. That'll give you a little bit more clearance so you can pull that oil pan out. And then everything else is pretty much straightforward. You know, you got to drain the oil. You take all the oil pan bolts out. You got a couple retainer clips for, I believe, some cooler lines, some trans cooler lines. You got a wire harness connection up front. This thing has the oil cooler option, so you need to undo that oil cooler block from the oil pan before you can drop it. So once you do all of that, you should be able to have enough room to drop this thing back and pull the oil pan straight out. So apparently my camera quit recording right in the middle of pulling that oil pan out. But as you can see, I had the oil pan out, and there's the pickup tube. And there's two bolts holding that thing in. Well, a bolt and one nut. You've got a 13mm nut here, and then up at the very front, up in here, you've got a 10mm bolt. So you take that out. Take this nut off, you can pull this whole assembly out, and then you'll be able to see the O-ring and replace it. So here's the oil pan. We got it out in the old gasket. You can see it looks a little dirty in there. We're going to clean that up before we put it back in there. And I will recommend, before you even start this job, try to clean underneath the car really well, because you'll have stuff falling down on top of you, and it just gets real messy underneath there really quick. So I did do that. Apparently it was just so dirty I couldn't get it all, but I'm going to clean this thing up nice and clean before I decide to stick it back in. I hate putting in dirty parts. So here's our oil pickup tube, and take a look at this O-ring. This is exactly what I'm talking about. These are the issues that you have. It's got a big crack in it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This will cause you to have low oil pressure, and that's not good. We're talking about engine failure really quick. No oil pressure, no engine. The oil in your engine is like blood in your body. Without it, you can't survive. So this part is only about $3 or $4, but you've seen how much work you have to do it. But this is exactly why I'm doing this, is because we're already at it. We might as well just go ahead and replace it. So I'm kind of glad I decided to do this, because that is obviously an issue. Now, this thing had oil pressure, and pretty decent oil pressure, but I didn't feel that it really was quite as good as it should be. So that right there was definitely our problem. Now, hopefully I don't think it hurt the engine or anything. I didn't really see any metal shavings or anything in the oil pan or anything out of the ordinary. So we're just going to replace this and go ahead and put it all back together after we clean it up. So what you want to do before you put this tube back in, you want to make sure you got that O-ring oiled up nice and good with some clean oil. And that'll make it slide right on back in. So another thing you need to do when you do one of these oil pan gaskets is you need to make sure that you put RTV on all four corners, in the front and in the rear. What you're doing is you're putting a sealant there right where the front and the rear covers meet the block. If you do not do this, it will leak. So make sure you do it. So here we got our new gasket on the oil pan, and the oil pan's cleaned up. I'm ready to go back in. So as you can see, we got everything back in. Got the front differential tightened up. Got the cross member back in, tightened up. Oil pan's all secure, it's tightened up. We got a new seal on the drain plug. New oil filter. We pre-filled it with oil. We got the new oil in. We got all the cooler lines and their brackets and our electrical connections all buttoned up. So the next step is to start this thing up and see what our oil pressure looks like. Also, we're going to take a look underneath here and make sure we don't have anything leaking. Now, one other thing that I like to do, and you don't have to do this, but I like to do it, is when I'm invasive, like I say, taking out an oil pan or doing anything like that, and I put fresh oil back in there, I'll always try to disconnect the coils so I can kind of get this thing to spin over and build up some pressure. That way we don't have a dry start condition. So that's what I've actually done here, and you can see I've got the coils unplugged on both sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to spin this thing over a few times, let the oil pressure build up, and then we'll come back out here and plug these coils back up. Alright, so we got the coils hooked back up. Let's see what she'll do. Oh yeah, she's got good oil pressure. As you can hear, she is purring like a kitten. Sounds really good. We got really good oil pressure now. That O-ring was definitely part of the problem. Don't look like we have any leaks underneath here either. Check out my other videos on this Yukon, and check out some of the other videos I have on some of my other projects. Like, share, and comment. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below and click the bell so you'll get the notifications. And also, don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Instagram.